You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
John Banks is a great mate. He stood by me thick and thin, and I've stood by him. He's a true friend who I've known since I was a boy in shorts. He's also one of the most compassionate politicians I've ever met. He joins me now. Welcome to The Crunch.
Hello, Whale. Can you hear me?
I can, Banksy. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I thought I'd give you a call and let's have a chat about this exciting election and your thoughts and processes, having been a former member of the ACT Party and, of course, in a caucus sitting with Winston Peters, and we'll just talk about the results, where it's going to head and what you think is going to happen.
Well, it's been a glad 3 weeks. It's been a celebration of common sense, common ground, and a good outcome for the people of New Zealand. This was a very, very bad Labour government. In fact, an evil Labour government, Marxist to the core. The elites were being developed, they were being built, they were being rewarded. The pippy pipes were full of bludgers sucking up the public tit, and the rest of us just had to suck it and see. And we did. We had an election. Fortunately, we still have elections in this country, Whale. We had an election and the Labour Party got rogered, and appropriately so, painfully so, because they deserve everything they get. They were a rotten outfit. They've taken this country to the brink of destitution, and now there's going to be a long, long way back.
Well, it'll be a long reckoning too, because I don't think we've finished dealing to the Labour Party for all of the excesses that they've done over the last 6 years. You know, I was talking to Michael Bassett before the election, and, you know, a finer gentleman you'll never meet. And I questioned him, you know, being a political historian, on whether or not, you know, how did he rate this government? And he said it's the worst in his lifetime, and he's 85 years old.
Yes, I know Michael Bassett well. He's a great mate of mine. He's an outstanding New Zealander. He is a true patriot, and he's one of our greatest, if not our greatest living historian. And he would have a good handle on this. I'm pretty angry, really, Whale, at where the country is. Just let me give you one matrix, and that is we've gone from a $60 billion debt to a $160 billion debt in 4 years. Now, the future of this country and the future discussions we should be having publicly and in cabinet and in government is about the economy, all about people's standard of living, hope to be able to pay the bills, the mortgage, have a future, educate their kids, pay our way in the world. Unfortunately, we're tracking right now to third world, without a doubt, on all the metrics, and it is very bad. These people, some of these people should be in jail, What they've done to the country is criminal.
Well, the economic vandals. I mean, Grant Robertson has presided over an economic decline that makes, you know, the things that your good friend Rob Muldoon did pale into insignificance. But at least with Rob Muldoon's debt that we had, we actually built things with it. You know, we've got the Clyde Dam, we've got Motunui, we had Marsden Point. These economic vandals have pretty much closed all of that down, apart from, you know, the dams.
Well, it's interesting because I was in a Rob Muldoon government when we were talking about all of those big projects. I was there when we had pickets and rioting on the picket line at Marsden Point when we built that extension. And I'm still alive today, bless the Lord, to see it closed down. When I say that, I'm very annoyed that we have closed it down, but it seems like time flies. But I was thinking, Whale, of the 7 prime ministers I've worked with and for, this is going to shock you. Helen Clark, by far, was the most competent.
I agree with you. You know, I didn't like her politics, but she was exceptionally competent.
And she had the Maori in their right place, she would have never allowed the incremental Maorification and racial division that has been built so well and fortified in this country these last 6 years. Helen Clark would never have allowed that. And Michael Cullen, now not with us, of course, sadly, but Michael Cullen was very competent around the books. He knew the books. And they kept the books in pretty good shape, Whale, compared to 60 billion 4 years ago to 160 billion in debt, most of it, Whale, most of the debt to Beijing. Now, if they had another term, if the people of New Zealand were stupid enough, and they're not, to give them another term, we would have been owned by Beijing.
That's the thing that's always worried me, and it concerned me too with the National Party under John Key. There seemed to be this grovelling towards Beijing. And, we were told that these free trade deals were going to do wonders for New Zealand, that we were going to have all these amazing things happen by signing up to these deals with Beijing. But at the same time, we were kind of like handing over our foreign policy to Chinese interests. We were beggaring ourselves to the Chinese, and it was very short-sighted, I felt, crawling up to the Chinese. I mean, you were in the National Party for a long time, just like I was. I can well remember senior National Party MPs, ministers included, and senior office holders like my dad, who was the Auckland Regional Chair, and then the president, attending the Taiwanese National Day and celebrations with the Kuomintang. They were, of course, in the IDU, International Democratic Union, together. Under John Key, that was all abandoned as we crawled basically up Beijing's backside. And I just could never countenance abandoning a democratic country like Taiwan to suck up to a communist dictatorship.
Well, it's worse than that, Whale. We've abandoned our sovereignty. You cannot have sovereignty when you have our level of debt. You know that.
Yeah.
We're not an independently minded country. We are a emerging third world country. We're a racist country. We're a deeply indebted country. We're an inward-looking country. We're a piss-poor political country, and we're a country in great strife. Now, this brings me to the election. And I'm going to give all the support in the world to Lux, to Seymour, and to Winston Peters. All the support in the world. As an old white man of no consequence, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to tell you and your listeners that I'm going to give them all the goodwill and all the support in the world to stop this big ship Aotearoa from crashing on the rocks, because it's bloody close. Yeah. It's very close, Whale, and then turn it around slowly. And, of course, it's 9 to 12 years, Whale. It's 9 to 12 years. And that is why Winston Peters is very important in this. Not because Winston Peters is Winston Peters, but because Winston Peters is going to add a lot of ballast to the big light blue ship National. Yeah. This is a National Party caucus that is at least woke with a small W, and worse, Fabian to the core. And so we've got to watch this very carefully. This is not an old-fashioned Tory, Keith Holyoake National Party government that I was part of all of those years ago when I first stood for Parliament all of those years ago. Yeah. This is a different animal because of the reckless experiment of MMP and the damage that reckless experiment has wreaked on our country, Whale. Therein lies another challenge. So, Whale, there's challenges today on all fronts, and more power to Lux, to Seymour, and to Winston to sort it out. But look, it's not just the change of government I'm excited about. I'm not terribly excited about the change of government. What I am excited about as a patriot is the change of direction that needs to take place and must take place on a broad front. And let me put this on the record today for you, Whale.
Yeah.
This war for the National Party, the ACT Party and New Zealand First, in the Parliament, in our Parliament, won't be a war between them and the parliamentary opposition. It's going to be a war between the coalition government and the civil service.
And
the civil service. Because the civil service is absolutely riddled with bad people, bad philosophy, bad concepts, bad principles, and bad habits.
Well, I mean, and then they're also assisted by a bad media that unquestionably are, 95% left-wing or hard left. There's only a very small smattering of conservatives, and even then there would be a small C conservative, and that's, again, the National Party aren't even conservative anymore. They're left-wing, just slightly left-wing, but they're left-wing nonetheless. And that's the problem that we've got in society.
I must pick up a couple of things going through this wonderful opportunity to talk to you, Whale, and thank you for it. And that is Brooke Van Velden, the face of the future of this country. Her politics are pure, a good, hard-working woman. She represents everything I stand for and stand against, and all power to Brooke Van Velden, and good on her for what she's achieved. But look, it's going to take more than Brooke. It's going to take more than Winston. It's going to take more than Lux. It's going to take more than all of them. What it's going to take is a country that's prepared to brace itself for the full stop that needs to happen and the about turn that has to happen.
That's what I'm worried about, is that particularly the National Party won't have the courage to do that. And it's then therefore incumbent upon the ACT Party and New Zealand First to put that full stop at the end of the 6 years that we've just had and try and reverse this creeping socialism and racism that has seeped into New Zealand society, along with, of course, the increasing crime, which shows that the societal impacts of 6 years of Labor are causing. The damage that's happened in society has led to the rise in crime. Now, you used to be a police minister. There was never this sort of nonsense when you were a police minister.
Well, for all of my faults, I wasn't weak. I wasn't gutless. I wasn't indecisive. And I had the support of the Commissioner of Police and the rank and file to sort out the shit that needed to be sorted out at the appropriate time. Now, gangsters running the country, running the roads, the highways, running the drugs, running the underground economy, and running the police racket. And it's got to stop. These are the kind of things where we need a stop, a think, and an about turn, and march backwards to what we know works. And being kind and generous to gangsters has never worked. And appeasement has never worked. It's worked to the extent that they all voted for the Labor Party, but that's all it's worked to the extent of. The rest hasn't. Now, we've got to round up these lowlife and we've got to put them in jail. And the other thing is we've got to turn around the judiciary. The judiciary is now loaded with left-wing, woke, racist jurists.
Wombles.
Well, they're all probably good human persons, and I'm not going to challenge them on that as a human person, but their philosophy, concepts, and principles are not in the best interests of this country. They're in the best interests of elitism, Whale. Elitism. And elitism defaults to Marxism, Whale.
Well, that's right. And you talk about the judges. And, we've had legislation in place that has tried to send a message that we want people incarcerated, we want them in jail, we want them off the streets so that they're not committing crime in our streets. and the judges go soft. They get a direction from the government, or they take it upon themselves to undermine, like 3 strikes, for example, which was a fine piece of legislation, which the judges set about using a very tiny wedge that was inserted into the legislation to undermine it. And it seems to me that what we need to do is, instead of setting maximum sentences for crimes, we should be setting minimum sentences for crimes that cannot be reduced by an activist judiciary.
Well, let's be innovative about law and order and crime. It's out of control in this country, as you know. It's out of control. And we're only going to deal with it with an intergenerational change. Now, when I go up to Mount Eden Jail and sit in a meeting with all the prisoners up there, 9 out of 10 Maori and Pacific Island, most of them can't read or write. Most of them have gluten. The vast majority of them have been raped as kids and sexually molested. They've been treated as dogs that you tie to a tree and kick it as you walk past, and then wonder why it bites you. So let's start with making jails work in the best interest of an intergenerational change that will stop this treadmill, and that is education. If you're going into jail, you're going to have to learn to at least read and write. You won't be released until you have a chaperone and somewhere to live and a job to go to and strict supervision, and you won't be able to rejoin the game. And let's start bringing back some sensible things that are going to change, not in the short term. Well, this is not going to change in the short term, but in the next 25 years, we could see some change. It's a disgrace. It is a disgrace, the number of the Maori, the First Nations people, and Pacific Islanders in New Zealand jails. It is so wrong. It is a disgrace. And we can only fix it through education and responsibility within the family. Don't continue to pay them all of the welfare that they need and want and ask for, plus all the food bank support that they need and want and ask for and get, and then expect them not to change their behaviour.
When people listen to you talk like that, Banksy, they just look at John Banks, the person they know now. Now, you've had an upbringing that, by all accounts, was dreadful. You've got every excuse in the world to have actually been a criminal, right? With your parents, the way you were brought up, all of those sorts of things, and yet you're not. So you are living proof that in New Zealand, we have a richness of opportunity if only you'd grasp it yourself.
Yes, I think I was blessed to the extent that although I went to 16 different schools, I had people that picked me up on the way, that knew my circumstances, that embraced me as a human person and gave me a bit of an education and taught me the difference from right and wrong and sent me to Sunday school.
And gave you a swift kick in the pants when you needed it.
Well, yeah, when I needed it. But most of the kids that I lived with went to jail and spent a long, long time in jail. And that's very sad. And, but for the grace of God. So I know what it's like to live in poverty. I know what it's like to be abused and assaulted. I know what it's like to piss the bed every night and get thrashed every morning. I know what it's like. And it's not good. And it's not good. And these things contribute to many of the crimes that we have in this country and the people that we have in jail. And if we think we're going to just continue doing what we've done for the last 25 years and expect change, it's not going to happen. Which brings me to another thing, well, if I can mention to you.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Charter school.
That was one of the finest things you did as part of your coalition negotiations.
Well, let me just put it in simple terms. We had a charter school in Whangarei. And if you went to Whangarei Boys High School today and asked the principal, how many of the Maori boys are going to get school certificate this year? He'd say about 40%. If you went to my charter school in Whangarei and said, how many of the Maori boys are going to get school certificate this year? They'd say, well, last year we got 96% and we hope to get 100% this year. Why the hell did this bad Labor government erstwhile Labor government, abolished charter schools when they were working for the most vulnerable and the people that they were tailored for, mainly the Maori people.
Well, we know the answer to that. It's pandering to the teacher unions.
Well, I want to talk about pandering for a moment, Whale, and
Sure.
I don't like pandering. We've pandered to the media with our money for too long. The Marxists have bought the loyalty of the New Zealand media. The New Zealand media is riddled with journalistic corruption.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, look at the performance over just the last 3 or 4 days, where we've had stuffed journalists writing articles that they were upset because Winston Peters wouldn't talk to them. You've had another stuffed journalist who wrote an article about the campaign launch for New Zealand First at Port Waikato, and the main thrust of the article was there was a lot of people with grey hair there and only one teenager, and it was just an attack piece. And then, of course, we had One News yesterday with their performance at the airport, offering to hold Winston Peters' briefcase for him or his bag. You can just imagine what would have happened if Winston had been stupid enough to hand over his bag and say, sure, you can carry it. You could just imagine it. On One News, you would have had that Simon Dallow on the TV going, Winston Peters is so feeble he can't even carry his own bag. That's the dishonesty that exists within our New Zealand media today.
But you see, it's worse than that. I don't care what shit something called Stuff writes. I don't know much about someone called Stuff that writes shit. I'm not interested. But I'll tell you what I am interested in, Whale. Yeah. I'm interested in the millions of taxpayer money that the Stuff get to run this shit.
Well, maybe we need to have a politician who we had all this, with Black Lives Matter in the United States and calls to defund the police. What we really actually need to do is defund the media, take away that government funding from them and all of the millions of dollars that they get put into them from the health ministry or from the police even run these nonsensical ads on the radio telling people to look again. That's how insidious it is to protect motorcycle riders. Now, you're a motorcycle rider. You ride a Ducati, of all things, right? Yes. A very powerful motorbike. Who is responsible for making sure you're safe on the motorbike? Is it you or is it everyone around you?
Yes,
it's you,
right? But Whale, coming back to the major point here, the major point is that Govt was funded by the state handsomely, and so were his propagandist handmaidens. Why in this democracy are we funding the news media, for God's sake? Why don't they leave it to those really bad radio companies like MediaWorks to spend their money, blow their money, and run their shareholder cash into the ground? Why don't they leave it to that? Why is my hard-earned taxes that I paid a week or so ago at the end of October, why the hell is my taxes being used to fund, for instance, that dreadful shit paper called the New Zealand Herald?
It used to be the paper of record, and it's just now, I mean, you could have used it a few years back to, line the kitty litter tray, but it's so thin now that you couldn't even use it to line a budgie cage.
Well, of course, you wouldn't respect me if I read it. I don't read it, but
no, neither do I.
My people tell me that they're funded to the tune of about $8 million a year. Have I got this wrong?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, there's all of this government money that's pouring into these media organizations. And of course, there's the 55 million plus and another 100 million as well that nobody talks about that was poured into the media over the last 6 years by this government. That just all needs to stop. We need to actually have a moratorium on any sort of government advertising in the media. Now, if some of those media companies fall over, so be it. That's what happens in a market when you don't have enough revenue from multiple sources. And let them fall over, because nature also abhors a vacuum. And then what will happen is people will go out and start their own new media organizations, the way they used to do when the media followed the rolling out of the railway or the telegraph in the United States. You had individuals who go out and set up a pamphlet, and then they get people to pay for that, and then it grew into a newspaper, a local newspaper. That was then gobbled up by these global conglomerates. I actually think we need to get away from these global conglomerates because it's not reflecting the man on the street, and go back to these little individual news outlets that people can support by subscribing because they like what they read.
Well, that's right. That's right. I don't care how many newspapers are out there, if they call them newspapers or Stuffs or any other agency.
Websites or whatever, yeah.
But I'm not interested in funding them, Whale. And this is the change in direction that I'm talking about. What I want to say this morning, Whale, is that we live in for New Zealand, in a very critical time in our history. Why is it a critical time? Because we're broke in an uncertain world.
Yeah, and defenseless.
We're defenseless, we're broke, and we're witless, and we're leaderless in a very uncertain world.
And we also live in a little speck of the world far away from anyone else. I mean, the closest neighbor to us is 3 hours away in a plane. So we are literally at the ends of the earth, and we are vulnerable, and we are weak, and we are ripe for the plucking. Right. So this is what Lux, Seymour, and Winston have got to do. Yep. They've got to get out a mini budget before Christmas, and it's got to be radical. It's got to be radical. There's got to be a change of direction. The civil service have got to start doing as they're told. The civil service needs to be triangulated. The civil service needs to be restructured. The civil service needs new leadership right through their ranks. Let me just take one civil service for you. I'm told, for instance, that much more time is spent at civil aviation, that's CAA. Yeah.
The design of Maori lanyards to wear personification cards for staff and the SCON committee at civil aviation, than in safety out in the provinces of our commuter airlines. Now, that's what I'm told. So we've got to get priorities right, Whale. We've got to have quite a radical change of direction. But there's something quite smart that happened that I loved about this country. I went to a couple of meetings, ACT Party meetings. I went out to May Road Hall, where in 1978 I debated Arthur Faulkner and got a thrashing that I'll never forget. Arthur Faulkner was one of the great Labour parliamentarians, an ex-war soldier and a very good man. I was 26 years of age. I knew everything. I challenged him publicly for a public debate. He took up the challenge. We met at the May Road Hall. 450 people turned up, and he thrashed me for 2.5 hours. And I'll never forget it. And anyway, so I went back to the May Road Hall, and it was an ACT Party campaign meeting 2 weeks before the election. It was full of ethnic Indian people. Now, they're hard-working, good people, ethnic Indian people. Yep. 25% of Roskilde is ethnic Indian. And they were talking, all they were interested in doing is what is the next government going to do to save our women and children from being bashed and stabbed in our dairies, our superettes, and our liquor stores. They were all the question. And so I wasn't surprised when the hapless National Party candidate won the seat of Roskilde, because the people spoke. And I love to tell the story to you and your listeners, Whale, because the people spoke in electorates up and down the country, often from different policy perspectives, but from a position of what is this government going to do to make my life better, or at least safer in my dairy at 10 o'clock at night with my wife and kids asleep on the floor out the back. What is this government going to do to save our business from these marauding criminals that are coming in and beating us up and indeed stabbing us to death.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, if you are a National Party candidate standing in Roskill or Mount Roskill or whatever iteration it has been since forever, you were really cannon fodder, and it was only in spectacular occurrences where the Labour Party had become tone deaf, had ignored the wishes of the people, that you saw idiots like Gilbert Miles elected. I don't know enough about Carlos Chung, but he clearly was more popular than Michael Wood, whose sole claim to fame before entering politics was that he worked for Hugh Wright's measuring the inside seam of men's suits. It doesn't really qualify him to be a cabinet minister, but yes, there he was. So you're absolutely right. When the electorate is ignored, the general population is ignored, that they feel that the government is not listening to them, then you get these upsets. But your wish for a mini budget, I think we need to be careful too around that, because you're a person of faith, as I'm a person of faith. You know, there's sometimes an unholy desire in New Zealand society to bash beneficiaries. Now, Matthew 24:40 says, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And there, Jesus Christ is telling us to look after the less fortunate. But we have got a problem in society where welfareism has got moved from a safety net to a trampoline. And there's a lot of people out there that are, and you alluded to it earlier on, when we were talking, where you said their every want and need met, and then they get more on top of that. And the hard-working Kiwi, the guy who's running the dairy, or the guy who delivers the bread and the milk to the dairy, they're getting a rough ride. And they're getting the predations of the criminal classes against them at the same time. And they're paying for the privilege of a whole lot of people who could work, who should be working, and aren't working. But
yes,
we need to have that compassion, don't we? And that's the thing I've learned from you, Banksy, over the years, that the personal part of politicians that many people don't see, and I'll always remember that day when you visited my mother in the hospice and did an amazing, compassionate thing. Now, people don't see that from John Banks. They only see the rhetorics. And I'd love people to see that more of that John Banks that I know.
Well, thank you very much. God bless your mother. Wow, she was a great woman. But it's true. I don't sing it from the hilltops, but I support a lot of people. I'm an AA, an alcohol counsellor, have been for 40 years.
Yes.
I spent a lot of time working with sick people. But you got to do your bit. I might just tell you in passing, Whale, that the greatest thing you can do for someone is give someone something that they'll never be able to repay you for.
Yes.
And I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in kindness and compassion. But I'll tell you what, I don't like bloody radio stations that are peddling BS with my money. That is worse than someone ripping off the welfare system. Wins is a radio station that masquerades as an honest third-party observer of all things good and bad in the country, and then writes propaganda and from the mouths of the government that have been funding them for so long, from the pithy pipe that they so love.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I mean, that's why Reality Check Radio was formed, because we needed to have that reasonable voice, that ability to have courageous discussions, to confront the issues that need to be confronted, to discuss in a rational way without getting overly aggressive and emotional. I mean, I listen to other radio stations and interviews that are held with politicians, and it seems there's this combative nature where it's us or them and we're going to get you. And it's unedifying. It doesn't educate people. I mean, you've spent a lot of time on radio. You took over from Rob Muldoon and you ran a show there. You've been on multiple radio stations. always your interviews were, a lot like mine, where you had a conversation with people and let them talk. And it seems that in New Zealand society, we've lost the ability to talk. We can disagree. Like I don't agree with Helen Clark, but I'm sure I could have a good discussion with her. I don't see eye to eye with Chris Trotter, but a finer man you've never met. And we've got this ability to have a discussion. But society in general has forgotten that ability to have a discussion. And I think we need to practice it more often.
True, Whale. Whale, we've become a lost people.
Mm.
We've become a lost people, Whale. The people are lost. This country is lost. It's rudderless. It's directionless. It's going nowhere except more into debt to Beijing. And we've got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Look, I'm just an old white man whose days now are counted. But I do still care about this country, Whale. Yeah. And I still have a measure of hope for this country because I want it good for my kids and my grandkids yet born. And so we've got to give it our best shot. We can't just abandon it. And so the change of government, we celebrate. Yes, I celebrated it for about 24 hours.
Yeah.
Especially seeing some of those people being thrown onto the scrap heap. I love that. I just love that. But it's not about the change of government. It's got to be a change of direction from every single corner and fabric of our society and our financial base, whatever that is.
And it has to be intergenerational too, because this 3-year electoral cycle is the death of us.
Yes. Let's talk about a couple of personalities, if I can.
Sure.
I'm really pleased to see Cameron Brewer win North Harbour, that seat out there. A really good bloke. You'd know Cam, wouldn't you?
Well, I've got a photo that I got off Dad the other day, which is a picture of you and Cameron Brewer and him, walking just after you'd won the Auckland Mayoralty. So that's how long we've known each other. I've known you since I was in shorts, and
you lived in Papatoetoe.
Yeah, it goes back a long way back. No, Manurewa it was.
Manurewa, and they don't call it Manurewa now. The colloquialism is Rewa.
Yeah,
that's what the police call it, Rewa. It's a very dangerous part of Auckland.
Yeah, and that's where I was brought up. So I don't think it's that dangerous. But it's changed now. But I mean, Dad tells me about the time when you came and knocked on his door, and you affectionately call him Johnny, and he calls you Johnny. It's kind of cute to watch a couple of old geezers call each other Johnny.
Well, I'll tell you about this old geezer. This old geezer is still working 6 days a week, and I've religiously paid tax. I'm still a patriot. I have a lot of hope for this country, and I'm still very supportive of people doing good things well. Yeah. And I'm also very, very supportive of the underdog and someone who isn't a genuine underdog and needs a helping hand. I'm very supportive of those people. I'm feeling optimistic, but while I need to say to the government yet formed, listening to this broadcast today, it's got to be a 180-degree turn for the better to march backwards to march forward. It can't be business as usual, and we've got to get to the root of the problems, and that is the elites within the civil service and the Maorification of everything New Zealand and the degradation of us old white people.
We've got to stop division in society. We've got to bring everybody with us, the least amongst us, and we have to act with compassion. But we also have to be stern as well where we need to be stern, because that is the compassionate way to actually address some of the societal ills that are besetting us, that are leading to the increased crime and the fearfulness that Kiwis have. And we never used to be fearful, living in New Zealand. We didn't lock our doors. We didn't have to protect ourselves with alarms and all of those sorts of things. Something's gone dreadfully wrong. And I think it is the creeping socialism over the years that has taught people, brainwashed people into thinking that the state is the answer for everything. And the state isn't the answer for everything. And we need to build that resilience back into our country of self-sufficiency, a can-do attitude, and a willingness to do the hard things first rather than put them off for later.
I couldn't agree more, Wal. And, you know, we're going to give this government our support. And I'm hopeful. I want to see this country paying its way. I want to see this country a proud place that we call New Zealand, the home where so many great soldiers lost their lives for freedom and democracy. I want to see with pride in our education system that works for everyone and gives jobs for all. And I just want to see us doing better and taking individual accountability and responsibility for our own actions and saying no to crime, no to gangsters, no to criminals, no to big borrowing, no to big spending, no to big noting, no to big government, and get on and carve our place in this world where we've uncarved it so successfully and isolated ourselves so dramatically.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, we have the potential to be the best little country in the world. And unfortunately, over the last 6 years in particular, but perhaps over the last 30 years, we've degraded our own abilities to such an extent where being the best little country in the world seems like a struggle when it shouldn't be. We are blessed with natural resources in people and on the earth and in the land, and yet we're struggling. And that is a travesty that needs to be reversed. And I agree with you 100% on that. Well,
what we need from our parliamentarians in the government and in the government caucus is a sense of purpose and direction, a clear mandate they have, a clear way forward has never been clearer because we've come out of the mist, and they've got to be resolute, and they've got to be brave, and they've got to do the right thing and do things right, and they'll stay around for a long time and save this country, Wales. So good luck to Lux, good luck to Seymour, and good luck to Winston. And by the way, Seymour is the outstanding parliamentarian of the last 10 years.
Yeah, but he had some missteps in the election. He focused too much on Winston Peters, and it cost him, and let that be a lesson to him, and I hope he learns that lesson.
Of course, he's got a lot of lessons to learn, but he worked harder than anyone else. He's smarter than anyone else. His politics are purer than anyone else. He does have his faults. I've known him since a kid of 12. He worked for me in my office as a speechwriter, as you know. But he's a good lad, and good on him and Brooke Van Velden. And we'll give Winston Peters all the support and encouragement he needs to do a good job for this country. Hey, because, it's got to be beyond these jokers. It's got to be about the future of the country and the kids yet born, isn't it?
Absolutely, it has to be. And that's the problem that we've had.
Well, I'll leave you with that. Love talking to you, and best
fantastic
wishes,
to have you on, and we'll have to get you on again sometime, Banksy. A real pleasure. Enjoyed talking to you. My gosh, I got a bit teary there, but Banksy really touched my heart that day in the hospice, doing something he didn't have to, giving my mother a gift she could never repay, a touching final gift from him to her. And that's why I'll die in a ditch for him. Tell me your thoughts on what Banksy had to say by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy right here on RCR.